There comes a moment in a man's life when silence becomes complicity, when remaining silent means betraying the truth. That moment arrived for Massimo Coppo on October 11, 2025, when in the square in Assisi, one day before the famous Perugia-Assisi peace march, he shouted with a firm voice, something that no one had the courage to say. He did not whisper, he did not seek compromises. He shouted the truth in the face of a world that prefers consoling illusions. What exactly did Massimo Coppo say in that square? What words so powerful and uncomfortable did he pronounce, right on the eve of a march that would see thousands of people parade in the name of peace? Today you will discover not only what Massimo Coppo shouted in that square, but also why he was perfectly right. Why his cry was necessary, and why what is happening at the Vatican and in Assisi represents two faces of the same tragic coin. If these topics are close to your heart, help us spread them. A like can do so much, as can your subscription to the channel. Thank you from the heart. To fully understand Massimo Coppo's cry in the square in Assisi, we must first understand what happened at the Vatican. What event triggered in him and in thousands of faithful Catholics a sense of deep indignation and spiritual pain? The event to which Coppo refers is something epical in its gravity. A concert in St. Peter's Square complete with flying drones, psychedelic lights, images projected on the background of the sky of the basilica, most sacred of Christianity. It was not a simple liturgical celebration with sacred music. It was a worldly spectacle. An event that transformed the Vatican Square into a theatrical stage, into a place of entertainment, like so many others in the world. But the problem is not only the form of the spectacle, but its content and its symbolic meaning. St. Peter's Square is not just any square. It is a sacred square, conceived by the genius of Bernini, with that colonnade, which symbolically embraces the entire world, to be reached with the gospel. It is the beating heart of Christianity, the place where martyrs shed their blood, where millions of pilgrims came to seek Christ through his vicar on earth. And instead, Coppo denounces with pain, that square has become a place of transit, where everyone comes to have their say. There was the gay pride, everyone comes to celebrate their causes, to promote their agendas. The square that should embrace the world to bring it to Christ, has become a square that embraces the world, to tell it that it's fine as it is, that there is no need for conversion, that all causes are equal. Let us not remain indifferent before this profanation. Let us write together in the comments. Lord, defend your church. Amen. But this degradation did not begin with the recent concert. Coppo recalls an event from 2019 which somehow prophesied what would happen. The installation in St. Peter's Square of a large sculpture of about 6 meters, in bronze, depicting a boat full of refugees. This disfigurement of the square, says Coppo, was almost a prophetic thing, because it marked the beginning of the transformation of St. Peter's Square into a place where the Catholic faith is replaced by social and political causes. Coppo is careful to specify that this is not about underestimating the drama of migrants, which is real and painful. The point is another, much deeper and more serious. One cannot let our Catholic faith decline into something that is not our faith. Christianity is not first of all social solidarity, it is not philanthropy, it is not welfare. Christianity is first of all a faith, which revolves around a God who dies to redeem us. This is the essence of Christianity, Coppo reaffirms with force. Christianity is Christ. It is not generic solidarity, it is not sentimental do-goodism. Christianity is passion for a God who is passionate about us. And He, only He, can give us true peace. When this fundamental truth is forgotten or put in the background, when the Vatican Square becomes a stage for social causes instead of a place of encounter with Christ, then we are facing a betrayal of the faith. The rearrangement of St. Peter's Square and what they do to us there corresponds exactly to a rearrangement of the Catholic faith, Coppo denounces. And the most evident symbol of this rearrangement is the encyclical Fratelli Tutti, which has completely deformed the authentic message of Saint Francis of Assisi. When Saint Francis wrote Fratelli Tutti, in his admonitions, he was truly addressing his Franciscan brothers. He did not want to assume one of the principles of the trinomial liberty, equality, fraternity of the French Revolution, which is a Masonic motto. That is not the spirit of Francis, it is absolutely not that. Francis did not preach an indistinct universal brotherhood, where everyone is brothers, regardless of the faith they profess. The encyclical Fratelli Tutti has truly deformed the foundations of the Catholic faith, Coppo insists, and the concert at the Vatican was done precisely to celebrate the Third Conference on Universal Fraternity, promoted by Cardinal Gambetti. The declared objective is to launch this new global religion in which we all love each other, where the faith one professes does not matter, where faith no longer matters. What matters is fraternity, the mottos of the UN, the globalist agenda. But Jesus said clearly in the Gospel that his brothers are those who do the will of the Father. This is the reality of the Gospel, not the fantasies of a universal brotherhood without Christ. And here we arrive at October 11th, 2025, on the eve of the Perugia-Assisi Peace March. Coppo denounces with a firm voice that the peace march that will take place the next day is a deception, a mystification of the true message of Saint Francis. This march, which bears the colors of the rainbow, and which has been adopted by the LGBTQ community as a symbol, will invade Assisi with a crowd that deludes itself into doing something for peace. But that in reality comes to Assisi, completely taking the wrong road. Because Assisi is the city of the peace of Saint Francis, not of the peace of worldly pacifism, Coppo shouts. Saint Francis greeted saying, "May the Lord give you peace." Not therefore peace, and that's it. If there is no Lord, if there is no Christ at the center, you will never succeed in having true peace. You can march and march as much as you want, it is useless to seek a peace without the Lord, without conversion to Him. You are only deluding yourself. Coppo denounces that this organization has adopted as its leitmotif the song imagined by John Lennon. It is a fantasy of a world that flees into utopia, because it flees from God. This famous song that has tormented us, and still recurs after so much time says literally, imagine a world in which there is no religion, everyone in agreement, all brothers. There is no heaven, there is no hell. What a disappointment when we discover over there that there is a judgment, and that Francis was right in the Canticle of Creatures, who spoke of heaven and hell. We must choose, Coppo shouts with passion, between the Canticle of Creatures of Saint Francis, or imagined by John Lennon. We must choose between a world that recognizes God as the source of peace, or a world fleeing from God. That seeks a narcotizing peace, deluding itself that there are no problems. The problems are there, and they will always be there, but they are not solved by marching, taking a nice walk in the countryside, as if it were a tourist trip. The problems are solved by praying, and doing penance, as Francis suggested, the real one. Francis went around saying, "Let us convert to Christ, let us convert to the gospel." Unfortunately, they have transformed him into a sign of pacifism, which in reality is a pacifism rebellious to God, in a world that does not recognize that it is God who holds the fate and happiness or unhappiness of the world. "It is God who sends wars as punishment," says Coppo, citing the prophet Isaiah. "I create light and send darkness." War is a punishment from God on a perverse world, more and more rebellious to God and His laws, even to natural laws. This is the reality of this world. And so it is useless for us to shout no to wars without recognizing that the true cause of wars is the sin of humanity, rebellion against God. Coppo recalls with bitterness that in the past several peace marches have been held, dozens and dozens. For example, in September 2000, there was one with the slogan "Never Again Armies and Wars." And where are we today? At the beginning of the Third World War. The Bible says clearly, "When they say peace and security, sudden ruin will come." And so it is not time for fantasies, for illusory utopias that make us feel good, without truly being so. It is time for a solid conversion to Christ, who to give us peace, died on the cross. And to His word, which remains eternal, beyond the illusory fantasies of this world. Coppo poses a direct and provocative question to that crowd preparing to march. Who is right? Are saints like Saint Francis and St. Clare, who said that the Eucharist was the road to heaven, or John Lennon, who says there is no heaven? Who is right? Are saints who gave their lives for Christ, or these foolish slogans of a world rebellious to God? How come, Coppo asks with indignation, do you want to take away from these poor wretches dead under the bombs, even the prospect of a heaven? How come do you want to tell them that there is nothing after, that everything ends here? Who is right? Christ and the gospel, or John Lennon and his fantasies? Let us stick to the gospel, let us hold it tight, because unfortunately in the church, there are people who adapt to imagine instead of to the gospel. Coppo recalls that Pope Francis said publicly, "I like to imagine, I like to think that hell is empty." What a disappointment, Coppo comments bitterly. Hell will be full of people who did not believe in it, who thought it was a medieval invention, to frighten people. Be careful, because the stakes are enormous, it is our eternal salvation. And we are in the time of the final choice, Coppo warns with a prophetic tone, in the time of every man for himself. On this world, that plays its games, even theological ones, that plays with the words of God as if they were plasticine to be molded at will, a divine judgment looms. The time is near, every man for himself. It is not time for illusory marches, it is time for authentic conversion. Massimo Coppo's cry in the square in Assisi on October 11, 2025 was not a cry of sterile anger or protest for its own sake. It was a prophetic cry, a necessary cry in a time when too many remain silent out of fear or convenience. It was the cry of a man who loves the Church and who precisely because of this love cannot remain silent in the face of the betrayal of the faith. The degradation at the Vatican and the deception of the Peace March are two faces of the same coin, the attempt to replace Christ with worldly causes, to replace conversion with do-goodism, to replace the gospel with the slogans of the world. Write in the comments the name of a Catholic saint that you will take as a model of authentic faithfulness in this confused time. Together we will rediscover the true witnesses of the faith. Speaking of betrayal, Pedro Regis in a recent catechesis denounced a very serious one that occurred during the Second Vatican Council. If you want to know more, click on the video that has appeared on your screen. May God always illuminate your path. See you in the next video.